Welcome back to CamBro Conversations. And today's conversation, I'm joined again by David Hatt, the founder of MTN Coaching. David,
I'm back.
He's back. Fifth or sixth time now, I think.
Popular guest.
Yeah, exactly that. And Chris Burns, the Savage Scholar. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Cheers, Colin. Glad to be here.
So last time out, we discussed a number of different self-development quotes. We'll probably revisit that at some point again in the future. Feedback on the episode was amazing. But this time, I've decided that we're going to take a group of concepts, things, items, habits, foodstuffs, and we're going to discuss whether we believe they are over or underrated. Now, over underrated is obviously subjective, and that means there's going to be some disagreement at the table. There's going to be some agreement. You might be shouting down your AirPods or shouting at your laptop screen, wherever you're watching and listening to this, in disagreement, but that's the beauty of the podcast. We can have a long form conversation with a bit of a disagreement. We can have a bit of an agreement, and hopefully you come away with some entertainment at least, but some value as well, no doubt. And with that in mind, we're going to start off with number one, and that's snacking. So snacking, I would categorize, if we define our terms, is in between meals, you're eating other foods, for example. For me, if I was to give my opinion and kind of color the conversation before we even start, I think snacking is one of the biggest problems you face when it comes to adherence to a diet, getting results from a diet, but also your gut health and structure to your day as well. Now, I'll come back to why I feel that way, but I'd be interested in you two, particularly David as our resident fitness expert.
Snacking for me, like I totally agree with what you're coming from a, I suppose, a fat loss standpoint or a health standpoint. But I mean, it does depend on your goals. If you're someone that maybe actually struggles to reach your calories, snacking could be incredibly useful. For me, I don't really have a strong overrated or underrated opinion on this one. I do on some of these other points I'm looking at here. But I think it can be something that's useful for some people, but for the vast majority, I think it's not useless, but it can be harmful. And it's certainly what slows down people's fat loss efforts from what I've seen from a fitness standpoint.
Within your own day, David, for maximal productivity, are you snacking or are you having meals?
For me right now, like I work best if we maybe should have put that on the list, intermittent fasting. So I typically fast between kind of 7 at night until probably 10 in the morning. So for me, my eating window is kind of 10 a.m. to about 7. Within that, there's probably 3 full meals and 1 snack / maybe a lower calorie meal. So I don't typically snack a lot right now, but I will say like my calories are actually building up to quite a high point right now. There will be a point where I maybe start to introduce more of that, and it's simply just for me to get calories in.
Yeah.
And again, I'd say for athletes, I've worked with a lot of athletes, snacking for them is incredibly important to actually just get the calories in, especially if it's an endurance athlete, someone that does a lot of activity, or just someone that struggles to gain weight. It's an easy way to just get calories in.
Yeah.
If you eat regularly, really for them, it doesn't matter as much what that food source is.
Yeah. Chris?
Yeah, well, I suppose I should be honest. Like I snack like I've just been dumped like every single day, man. Yeah, I'm pretty bad for
Do you
snacking.
graze? Is that
Yeah, I am. Well, the thing is, you know, like when you say, "Oh, I graze," that would typically mean I don't have big meals. I have big meals and I graze all day, right? I'm going to be honest, but yeah, I would be. I think it is. I would agree with what you just said,
yeah.
Andrew. I think it isn't. It's not a good habit to get into, is it? You know, whether it's even if you don't necessarily have a goal, I think like sometimes if snacking is like a sense of like comfort or distraction, it's just not a good thing to be forming a habit around, I don't think, you know.
Yeah. Touched on productivity there as well. I think from a mental standpoint, for me, I actually struggle to like concentrate right after I've eaten, and it's different for everyone. That like you can probably eat and work type thing. I struggle to do that, and you also need to look at from a productivity standpoint, moving away from what you're doing to then snack. It's like a pattern interrupt, I suppose. So it can make things harder, certainly for me, but again, opinion.
Use the term pattern interrupt. A lot of snacking emotionally comes from seeking distraction. And I was lucky to speak to Nir Ayal on the podcast, and he was saying about a lot of what we do to distract ourselves from work comes from some sort of internal pain, and that can be done through checking social media. It can be done through pointlessly refreshing your email inbox, even when you know the high value task you need to do is write a great piece of copy. It is complete a new program or reply to a particular challenging message from me or something like that. Doing some sort of like snacking or taking food on board can be a habit, like you say, that we build up, which we deem to be like important because, well, of course we need to eat, but we're actually using it to get away from what we need to be doing.
Yeah, I think it's that thing where when it comes down to distracting yourself or procrastinating, basically, it's it's easy to justify because it's like, I can't start this work because I feel a bit hungry, so I need to go and eat something, and then I'll start, and then you go and eat something, and then as you're eating, you scroll on your phone, and then you scroll on your phone, and then before you know it, half an hour, 45 minutes has went by, and you know, it's all started from like wanting a cereal bar, or like, you know, going into the kitchen and opening up the cupboards and just having a browse and seeing what's there. So yeah, no, definitely not a good thing from that standpoint either.
Yeah.
One of the more science-based reasons that I'm not pro snacking is, and in the mad world of podcasting, this conversation will probably come out before this other conversation comes out. But I spoke to a lady called Cynthia Thurlow, who's a big advocate of intermittent fasting, and she was talking about the repairing cycles that the gut and the brain go through after we eat, and by saturating your body constantly with food more than every 3-4 hours, up to maybe 6 or 7, she advocates for, even in between meals after you've broken your fast. Basically your gut never is recovering, and it's never cleaning itself out, so to speak. And the brain, now there's a lot of pseudoscience in that space with insulin and stuff like that as well. However, I can see there is benefits, because if you look at when you're most productive, David, in your morning block, I'm very similar until I eat. I maybe have a bit of a lull, and then I kick in again, and then I eat again and have a bit of a dip.
I think, like you said, like from an insulin spike standpoint, it does make you more tired, especially if it's a high carb food. That's naturally going to make you more tired. Like, and for anyone that struggles with sleep, that would be something I'd say to do. Actually consume a lot of carbs right before bed, because it can release certain hormones that make you more tired, that make you sleepier. So if you're doing that throughout the day consistently, and you're consistently, because I mean, people don't snack on healthy things. People snack on high fat, high carb foods. No one snacks on protein. No one grabs cold meat. No one grabs a protein shake. No one grabs things like that. So let's be honest, snacking is on things like crisps, it's on things like cereal bars. So these things are high in both carbs and fats, which typically will, for most people, make them a little bit more, I suppose, lethargic, make them a little bit more tired as well.
I think throughout this initial conversation, in terms of our first underrated, overrated debate, I think it's overrated if you're using it in the incorrect way. It's underrated if you're using it for the right tools. But an awful lot of people that think about their diet and their performance, they probably would err towards not having as much snacking within their day if they're looking for peak performance in both. But equally, David, like some of the numbers that you're maybe going to climb your calories towards, and the athletes that you've worked with, they probably want to be snacking more often. And equally, Chris, if you're feeling a unit like yourself, you're going to need to get the food in. Yeah,
no, I do, because I mean, my hard training days, I do 2 sessions a day on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Do weights in the morning. It's either rugby training or conditioning at night. And then if I've got if the season's still going, there'll be a game on a Saturday. So Tuesday, Thursday, Saturdays, I'll snack more on those days, out of necessity more than anything else. Like, I was kind of half joking earlier on, but Mondays and like other days, I don't really feel the need to. But like on those days, like you said, I just feel like I need to get fuel in somehow. Especially if in those days I've got a busy day at work, and then you've gone 3-4 hours, and you're like, I've got a session to do in an hour, and I need to get something in here, but I don't want to have a big stodgy meal. I need to just get something quick. So yeah.
Yeah, I think everything you do, Chris, is quite intentional at that point as well. That
very much so.
Too.
Yeah.
Right, on to number 2. Reading fiction. Overrated, underrated? It's something that you guys do?
Underrated. Massively underrated. People need to do more of it.
I mean, I would say overrated because I simply don't do it, or I don't know enough about the benefits of it to use it.
Yeah.
I would say.
I spoke to Ed Cunningham on the podcast back in mid-2021. He has a podcast called The Need to Read, so he tends to be a bit of an expert in this space. And I think I'm maybe taking the wind out of some of Chris's sails here, but we'll soon find out. He says from a creativity standpoint, reading fiction is a game changer, especially for the kind of people that listen to podcasts like this, the kind of people that maybe like our sort of content, where we're very self-development focused and trying to be our best selves. We sometimes forget that, yes, we've read Atomic Habits, we've read Essentialism or whatever else, but have we read a book that's maybe sparked a bit more creativity in our heads rather than just improving on our routines and our habits and our behaviours?
I think for me personally, I don't love to read. I love what I get from reading, but I don't enjoy the actual act of reading. So for me, if I'm going to be reading, it's going to be something that I see directly improving some aspect of my life, as much as I think this probably would, because what you're about to tell me, I'm going to say, from and like you said as well, from a creativity standpoint, maybe I could be doing with more of that. But if I only had half an hour a day to read, which is kind of what I try and aim for, I'm going to read something that I'm going to directly take something from and use in my business or use in my personal life.
Yeah. I mean, I think like from a practical standpoint, reading fiction, if you're looking from a self-development lens, it can help tie together the kind of non-fiction concepts that you read. Because if you think about it from the early stages of humans, if you like Greek mythology is still popular to this day because the lessons tied up in those stories still have such relevance to, like, Icarus flying too close to the sun, burns his wings, all of those kind of things. Even like more kind of modern day ones like the tortoise and the hare, you know, consistency matter. All of these are fictional stories, but they're grounded in real truths. Also, you've just got the fact that it's useful for escapism. Like I think it's useful. I used to, back when I was coaching, used to recommend people read some fiction before bed, because it's just that. Because I think if you read, like for me, I can't read a non-fiction book before bed because my brain lights up. I've got 100 ideas going through my head. Yeah. Whereas I'm right now, I'm a huge Stephen King fan. So I'm reading Stephen King's The Stand right now, and it's just, which is quite ironic because it's about a plague that takes over the world, but we'll not go into that. I didn't know it was about that before I started reading it. So that gives you real escapism. And then for me, I suppose if anybody's listening or watching that is in the kind of in my line of work, if you are in marketing and advertising and things like that, some of the best hooks and headlines and ideas for campaigns I've got from fiction and from from stories and little lines and different characters. So there's a huge amount of benefits. It's not just a case of just reading a book and escaping. There's a lot of actual benefits on the self-development side of things as well.
Much like you, my mind does start to fire before bed when I read a self-development book. Yeah. But that's typically when I find the time to read. And like David, I'm also quite strict on how much time I assign to a particular habit, just by nature of how busy my day is.
Time management. Yeah.
And I definitely think that I have a massive bias towards reading non-fiction almost at all times. However, I do quite clearly see that it is probably underrated, the benefits you could get from reading fiction if it fits within your day. I think if I was to kind of rank what I should read, it's probably going to be those self-development books that really move the needle. Yeah. But I think finding time to read some fiction as part of your day or as part of your week or however you want to structure it can have some big benefits. And Chris, you are a storyteller by trade effectively, aren't you? Like you tell stories to sell products and services. You probably want to read good storytellers to get ideas as well. Yeah,
exactly. And I mean, but even if you look at, for example, American Presidents, the most commonly read book among ex-American presidents is Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. Now, that's probably going to fire some people up. It's quite a controversial book, but it's a fictional book. So, and Ayn Rand's quite a controversial author, but those stories had, and look at things like George Orwell, 1984. You know, Animal Farm, a lot of things by George. There was a lot of social commentary in those stories. So as much as, it is a story, and there are ones that there's plenty of fiction books out there that have got absolutely zero social commentary and are just great for escapism. But there's other ones, even something like Lord of the Rings. Like Lord of the Rings is inspired by World War One and Tolkien's time on the front line in Belgium and France. So I mean, there's a lot. I'm just saying there's a lot of parallels there, and I think like people could probably get a lot more from fiction than at first sight. And even if you look into the actual process of writing great fiction, like Stephen King's book On Writing, that's what it's called, On Writing, I should clarify that, is about like I can add a little bit about his early life and then how he constructs his stories and how he writes. And it's fascinating to see somebody who's like the most prolific, probably one of the most prolific fiction writers of all time. His work has been adapted onto the screen more than anybody else. And when you see how his process, I just think when you see somebody at the top of their field, in any field, and you get an insight into their process, it's incredible. And storytellers, they're literally starting from an idea. I think that's a really valuable thing to see.
No, totally. What would you say for someone like me and Colin that's maybe not into that right now, but maybe wants to bridge the gap between non-fiction, personal development, and a book?
Oh, we love steering it to a practical.
Do you know what I mean? You can kind of then go, okay, I think that's relevant. Like that's. I suppose for me, if I was to look for a book like that, that's where I'd look to maybe start so I can get into it. Is there anything off the top of your head?
Oh, of course, absolutely. So I would pick up anything by Dave Trott. Right. Okay. Mainly Predatory Thinking, 1 + 1 = 3, and Creative Blindness. Now he is very well known in the kind of the old school London ad agency world. He was he was a kind of creative director at a lot of top agencies, doing like huge kind of Madison Avenue style campaigns, you know. So his books are a collection of short stories that relate back to a life lesson or principle. Some of it's sales and marketing, some of it's just general life. So I would start out with him for sure, because he shows you how to take those stories. And then obviously they always end the lesson. It's really easy to flick. They're actually really addictive. You'll probably find you go through it in a week because they're so addictive. And then outside of that, I would pick up Stephen King's On Writing. It's because it goes all the way from his early life, how he creates his fiction, and then also covers for people who don't know, he had a really terrible, he almost died, he was almost killed in a road accident, a van wiped him out. So I'd recommend those.
So that Stephen King one in particular is like a bridge between fiction and non-fiction, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Perfect.
Number 3, being relatable online.
Do you want me to kick off with this?
I go.
I would say it's underrated. I don't think enough people do it well, to be honest. I think everyone's trying to, especially if you look at the business space, or you look at the personal development space, or to be honest, even the fitness space. I think a lot of fitness people, again, that's my world, tend to try and set themselves much higher than others, which is often...
Can I interrupt just very quickly? I've worked with a lot of people in the online fitness space. I'm not just saying this because he's my friend and client. Like, you are one of the best at this I've ever seen. Like, absolutely 100% smash out of the park.
Okay.
100%. Please carry on.
I think a lot of that is just from being like genuinely just honest. Like, I don't, and it's not like I'm not going to be one of these people that says I don't care what people think, because I massively care what people think. Certain people. I think it's underrated. I don't think enough people do it well. And I think it's just because a lot of people just aren't authentic. And you know, they don't actually have much that they can relate to their audience. And I've not got a huge following, but based on the following that I've got, I think popularity based on that small following,
people are so connected with you. I can tell you that from when you come on the podcast, the listens for your followership versus people with bigger followings, the conversion's much higher, because people are like, I really like listening to David. I'll go and listen to him for an hour. I watch his stories every day. Why not listen to a podcast with him?
Yeah.
And that's a testament to your relatability in the fact that they know the real you quite well. Like, you don't hide an awful lot. Obviously there's some things that need to stay behind closed doors, but it's important to have like a relatively open relationship with your following.
I think I've always done it as well. I think it's not been, someone's not said to me you need to be more relatable when it's happened. I think I've just generally been, I put most of my life out there, which sometimes isn't a good thing, but I think as a coach and somebody who people deem to be a successful coach, I'm the first to admit when I'm having an off week, and I'm the first to admit when I'm actually feeling like shit, or I'm the first to admit when I've drank too much at the weekend and I feel like absolute death. And I think that in the fitness space, it isn't seen enough. And if you look at all these Geordie Shore and all these like fitness models that are in incredible shape, who are doing other things rather than just training and nutrition, but they're not relatable in the slightest, and they don't showcase that side of things. And I mean, you look at a lot of the people in the fitness space that are relatable, that are in incredible shape, that from a physique standpoint, for example, admit to actually taking anabolic steroids, or admit that other side of their life. It makes them relatable in the sense, or not even relatable, it makes them just honest and authentic.
Yeah, straight away, I think of TM Cycles.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of there.
He's so open about what he's doing, and he has a very engaged audience because of that. Whereas there's maybe fitness models who maybe look a bit better than him, but use every bit as much in terms of peds.
But they do those pictures where they kid on, they've got fat rolls, and then they stand up and flex, and that makes them relatable, doesn't it?
One thing I was going to touch on was, I actually think the worst type of people on social media are people that have been told to be relatable.
Manufacturers.
They post photos of them crying, or they over.
Who gets their phone out when they're crying? I never understand that.
I'm not going to say too much because I actually have I know people that have done that, but I physically don't understand. If I'm feeling that way, I'm definitely not going to document it. Unless I suppose they are thinking out of the light of, do you know what, I feel like this right now, maybe my audience is going to feel like this at some point.
I need to help.
Yeah, I can kind of see it from that side.
But then
it's
you
not
look
me.
at the rest of their feed though, and a lot of what they do is manufactured in terms of, I'm trying to create a connection with my audience, whereas you're just showing up in your story and talking and showing what you're up to. Whereas I think Chris called it there, like the fat rolls, the cellulite, whatever somebody's come up with today to be like, oh, look at me, I'm just like you. The thing is, you're not just like you. Like you are, your physique is in the top like 1%.
Yeah.
Like you are so handsome. You've never needed the filter in your life.
Thanks.
Like why?
Cheers, mate.
Exactly. You both of you fall into that category.
You see that's it's show don't tell. Don't tell somebody you're relatable. If you have to say, I'm just like you, I know what you're going through, then you're full of shit, because you would just naturally put that across on your social, so people can naturally look at your stories when you're sharing whatever, good, bad or indifferent, and you don't go at the end of those stories, so I'm just like you guys, you know, it's like, it's just so unauthentic, and people can sniff it a mile away. We've almost got, I'm not saying everybody does, because there's plenty of mugs out there, but most people have a kind of radar for that, and they can tell when somebody is doing this purely for like engagement on the social media context, purely and for engagement purposes. People know that.
I'm the first to admit when I'm dieting and when I'm getting lean how easy I find it. Like, I'm not trying to say I'm relatable to you, because I'm actually not. Like, I have the easiest setup ever for getting lean. I control my full diary. I've got decent enough genetics. I've been training for 15 to 20 years. Like, it's easy for me. And I suppose that's maybe not relatable, but actually I think people try to be relatable, and
that's transparency.
Yeah.
I'm the exact same. I say, like, see, if you told me I had to eat chicken and rice for 4 meals a day, I would probably do it, because my mental state is like that. My discipline's quite good when it comes to that kind of stuff. So that means I'm not relatable, but I don't try and tell people that my approach to dieting is the number one way to do it.
Yeah.
And none of your programs like replicate the exact way that you would diet down, because your personality is different.
Not.
A lot of the people you coach work in a 9-5 job.
Yeah.
So
have kids.
Yeah. So they certainly don't live the same way you do. So I think being relatable online is definitely underrated in some ways. But to throw a tiny spanner in the works, I think you need to be that little bit ahead of your audience in order to support them with where they want to go to.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at a roadmap,
I like that.
If you were on the exact same level and you were completely relatable, I probably wouldn't take advice from you.
Yeah.
Whereas if somebody is a little bit further ahead, I would probably be like, right, okay, well, I can relate to them because 5 years ago they were in a similar position to me, or they were doing similar stuff to me. But wow, like, I'm not quite where they are yet, but I'd like to get there, so I'm going to listen to their advice.
Love that. Mostly because something I preach all the time is I struggle to take advice off someone that's not further ahead than me in a certain field. So finance, for example, like, my dad's probably not going to listen to this, but when my dad gives me advice in finance, I don't really take it, not because he's not done well financially, because he has, but there's been certain things that he's done, or he's not been in the same space as me anyway. But yeah, certain people, and it's like overweight people giving you advice on fitness. It doesn't actually make sense in my mind. Like, so yeah, I totally agree. You need to be further ahead in that
relatable, but some sort of example to people as well. So,
yeah, I find that, and like, whenever I've shared something on my socials about like my kind of career path the past 2 years, see, the most replies I've got is from people who are where I was 2 years ago. And I was just like shooting from the hip, just talking about a particular event that happened, or a struggle, or a win that I achieved, and people reach out, like just what you're saying there, because I'm probably like that little bit further ahead than them, but not so far ahead that it's unattainable. Yeah. You know, it's just those 1-2 steps ahead, and they're probably sitting there going, oh, well, I'm just trying to get my first cooperating client. Yeah. And you were there 2 years ago, and I've just heard you share something about getting your first client, or being let down by a client, or being ghosted for an invoice, whatever story I've told, and they straight away they go, they immediately feel better, because they just feel like, because you always feel like you're one of one, don't you? And then you realise when people share those things, you're not.
There needs to be a closeness between that gap. It can't be too big.
Nah, you're absolutely right.
I think of an example in the copywriting world.
Yeah, well,
like,
I mean, there's
you and Dan Kennedy to an extent.
You know, nothing to relate to with that guy. Absolutely not.
But you could still obviously learn a lot from him. I think there needs to be that gap, and not too big. There needs to be to really get the most from someone, I think.
A happy medium between where they are and where they've been and where you want to get to. And you only need to be speaking to that percentage of the people online. You don't need to speak to somebody who's right at the very beginning, who's never even considered trying to get to where you are. And you don't need to be speaking to the people that are further down the line than you, because they're not going to listen to you in terms of what you've got to say.
Yeah.
Number 4, willpower.
Overrated, I would say.
First of all, does do you think it exists?
I don't know. I mean, well, I do. I think it does.
So, yeah.
I think it does. I think it's obviously people have varying amounts, but I think it is a finite resource in every single person, and eventually chickens come home to roost if you just purely rely on this to try to achieve something.
You define it? Would you define it as similar to motivation?
Yeah, if I was, I think it's probably slightly different to motivation in that I think it's you can apply it in settings where you're not motivated. So I think it goes beyond that initial buzz of like, I'm going to do this. Yeah. I think willpower is kind of there, and it sits somewhere alongside discipline, but probably not quite in the same bracket, where you're kind of tapping into stores of it. Although there is some controversial thought process on that is not like a finite resource, that is in fact just everyone's got the same amount and we don't tap into it at different times. It's very much habit based. Neri Al was quite interested in the podcast. He kind of red pilled me on it a little bit, but I think for me, willpower is underrated in some senses, but overrated in others, and that's such a difficult answer to give, isn't it? But if you think about willpower, I think a lot of people never test it But then some people rely on it all the time, and they're like constantly like, oh, my willpower just wasn't strong enough. And you're like, well, probably your habits and your systems and your routine weren't strong enough. Your willpower is probably fine, and the days when you need it, you might get it, but you're just constantly testing it, so of course it just doesn't exist.
I like the people that kind of randomly decide to start like a fat loss diet on a Monday, and then it's like they've got nothing set up, they've got no meals prepped, they've got nothing good to go, and then it's like it's basically a willpower diet, isn't it? And you're just counting down the days until your willpower says nope, and then you just go tonto on a mad binge.
Yeah, I think you could put a lot of things into that box of a similar discipline, integrity, willpower, motivation. And again, it depends what word you use and how you used it. But I would actually say I'd say it's underrated in the sense that not enough people have willpower. Yeah. But then you need to look at why they don't have enough willpower. Is it because they don't have the right system, structure, and routines in place to actually achieve that willpower? Like I would be deemed to have high willpower in dieting. So would you, because we've done it numerous times, but we've got the habits and systems in place to do that. But for something else, willpower, like for me not to have a glass of wine most nights, I don't have the willpower to do that. It's kind of because I don't want to as well. So it's hard to try and box these things, I think.
Yeah, see, that's so interesting because people always think, like, when people find out I don't drink alcohol and I never have, people always say, oh, I wish I had like your willpower. And I'm like,
that's the first term, isn't it?
Zero willpower involved in this, because there has to be a desire, like you said, for willpower to take place. Like for me, willpower is having a bowl of ice cream instead of the whole tub. Because I've got a massive sweet tooth. Like that I need willpower to, not willpower, but there's a desire there for me just to, stick my face in the tub of Häagen-Dazs. Not Ben and Jerry's, by the way. Ben and Jerry's for wee guys. Häagen-Dazs is
so
top
Ben
tier.
and Jerry's is overrated.
Yes, it is overrated because Häagen-Dazs is a superior ice cream. Häagen-Dazs salted caramel and Häagen-Dazs strawberry cheesecake is a superior. That's where adults go in the freezer aisle.
You had London Dairy.
That's
ice
where.
Cream.
What's that?
London Dairy.
Sounds like it's for nonsense. Sounds like London Dairy. London Dairy. That sounds suspiciously like something else which we won't go into in this podcast because that might get hairy very quickly.
We're gonna have a Northern Ireland political discussion.
Yeah, exactly. London Dairy. Where's the dairy farms in London? That's
I don't know, mate. It's good ice cream, but class.
Häagen-Dazs.
I'd say it's a mix between Ben and Jerry's and Häagen-Dazs. I do love Häagen-Dazs. If I was to pick one ice cream, it would be Häagen-Dazs Dulce de Leche. Unbelievable.
Controversial.
Unbelievable.
I would have Häagen-Dazs salted caramel.
Nah, I've actually.
There's not honestly see that moment where you put the spoon in and you just like tap into like a well of salted caramel just comes pouring onto your spoon. That's like one of the greatest moments.
You should be the new Marks and Spencer's advert guy.
I could do anything. I know I could be actually.
Or core.
This isn't just ice cream. This is Häagen-Dazs ice cream. Do like NSDR shit with it. I could do that. I'm going to pitch them. I'm going to pitch Häagen-Dazs.
Yeah.
I'll listen to that.
Sure.
You imagine my big Mongo boy. This isn't just ice cream. No sales. Pulled off the shelves.
Right. So willpower then.
Yeah.
In many ways, it falls in behind all the different other factors which are so important. However, it's underrated because a lot of people don't ever give it a chance to be exercised.
Yeah, no, I think that's bang on.
Themselves up right.
I think as soon as they meet resistance, they fall away. So whether it's a hard rep in the gym, whether they can't quite get into their work, like there's another bit of Stephen Pressfield's War of Art, he talks about overcoming resistance. So like what we were talking about earlier, being distracted by snacking, it's like that's resistance there. You need to overcome that and then maybe give in. So I think that you're right. I think that's bang on.
Right, number 5, our first food stuff, although we've definitely talked about ice cream now. Number 5 is oats.
Overrated.
That's
so bad, mate. I know you love them.
Oh, you two cannot come at me on my own podcast. This is outrageous.
I just don't understand what is good about oats. They are literally sawdust in a bag. Like that's how I'd describe oats. The only way to make oats taste good is to add hundreds of shit on top of them. Put a Mars bar on it and put it in the microwave and sprinkle some fucking sprinkles on it.
Yeah. So
some sprinkles.
I know my taste buds are quite plain, so obviously I'm going to caveat that with I think a lot of people are going to be like, well, he's coming from that standpoint, and I accept that. Like I was saying about the dieting part, like I could handle if you told me it was oats and egg whites, I wouldn't be chuffed about it, but I would do it.
Yeah.
I love oats, but also I have chocolate whey or salted caramel whey or cinnamon Danish whey in them every single time.
Right.
I like the macronutrient profile on them, so that makes me biased. I like the way that I digest them and I feel good and strong and full of carbs before the gym. So that's all factors that lead into it. Whereas David, from a taste profile, you're just saying it's not for me, and maybe the texture as well if you're using terms like sawdust.
I also see oats as a breakfast food. on the most part. And for me, breakfast is something cooked. It's bacon, it's eggs, sausage,
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
much every day, cheese.
I think practically everything you said, like practically oats make sense, but taste wise and everything else, like I'm very much like I need my food to like I can't really eat for function. Like even when I'm I'm
Yeah.
very much a flavour. Like food is a pleasure for me. So like, oats just don't do it.
I'm
man.
gonna have to make a stronger
Just don't
case
do it.
because people are gonna be really upset by this. 'Cause
I'll help.
I think there's a lot of people, but with regards to oats, how do you guys make your oats? Are you just doing it wrong? Is that the problem?
I walk by them. I walk by them in the supermarket and pick up a box of cornflakes. That's what I do. That's how I make my oats.
I made
Cornflakes instead.
Cornflakes. See the cornflakes bites. See the new ones. The new ones that are kind of like crave.
Crunchy nut, no?
What?
Crunchy nut.
But listen,
cornflakes.
listen, I'm telling you, right? You walk by, like the cereal crave. It's
Yeah.
got the hazelnut filling. Well, Kellogg's do a crunchy nut one, and it's like a peanut butter and cornflake paste in the middle of them, and they are, it's like crack cocaine. So sorry. Anyway, yeah, I've never really
Were
made.
you
oats
raised with like cereals like that as children?
before.
I think,
Like
that's
shite.
I think it's a form of child abuse. Like my parents were like very like eat excellent, clean, good food sources, Colin, and that's why I'm the office athlete
Nah,
now.
mate, I grew up in Pop Tarts, like genuinely. And I'm actually
For breakfast.
Yeah, I'd have Pop Tarts for breakfast, which is
I grew up on
wild,
cornflakes. To be
but
fair,
that is-
crunchy
that
nut
is-
cornflakes.
Pop Tarts are a breakfast food, but I would always have Pop Tarts in a bowl of cereal, which is it's probably like 80 grams of carbs like every morning. Why I probably people thought I had
Hyperactive
ADHD.
child.
Like,
That's probably why you're a pain in the ass.
I'll eat like that. Actually, like I grew up in good food because mom and dad were both good like chefs, so I had good meals. But breakfast was just like have what you want.
Before school, you were just smashing something.
I mean, my mum's a phenomenal
Nutella.
cook.
But I think we've been programmed society like to have cereal for breakfast.
Oh mate.
Oh, so true.
So I ate a salad last week, salad with chicken sausages, right? Kind of weird, but I had it for breakfast. Well, that's the thing. It is weird, but it shouldn't be.
It's not.
And somebody in the gym, a PT actually, came up and she was like, "Oh, that's weird, salad for breakfast." And she literally poured herself a bowl of cereal, which again, like nothing wrong with cereal. I eat cereal sometimes, but it's just a bowl of technically sugar, carbs. And that's not deemed as weird, but it's technically a lot worse for you than me sitting munching down some lettuce
Yeah.
and chicken sausage.
That's interesting because
People's perception.
Jill, my fiance, she always thinks this is weird about me. I do not attach like a time
Same.
to food. I will eat any food
Curry
at
for
any time of the day.
breakfast.
I would eat anything for breakfast, anything for lunch, anything for dinner,
Same.
as long as it's tasty. Like I'll have steak for breakfast.
Is that always the case, or do you think your
Yeah.
fitness mindset changed
Oh,
that?
that's probably true because I think like when I worked in hospitality for years, like the windows you got to eat were so small, so I had to be like, right, I can't have a bowl of cereal for breakfast because I'm going to miss my protein intake, so I need to have. So I used to have like 2 chicken wraps for my breakfast, then
Yeah.
go work a 13-hour shift, and then have another chicken wrap when I finish or something like that. So that totally disassociated me from any like this is a breakfast food, this is a
social
lunch
norm.
food.
Yeah, yeah.
Aye.
I think fitness does
similar.
switch that for you because you've
That's
got
a
a
good
protein
point.
target to
Yeah,
work towards.
yeah.
Seems you think breakfast, you think eggs and bacon, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm the
Still
same.
steak,
I'm the
steak and
same.
Still,
yeah.
but I mean, like, I will eat anything. I'll eat leftover Chinese for breakfast. Like, not advocating you do that. But
But yeah, oats, I've taken a battering on that.
so
I'm afraid so, mate.
been outvoted.
You
So.
voted on the oats.
Yeah, it's
That's the
unfortunate.
first really strong, like,
I know.
2 opinions against one. What we got
It was
next?
oats.
Number 5 is getting a mentor, and you guys have excellent experience in terms of business, and I'll maybe speak a little bit from like within a corporate career because I think a lot of people don't quite get that right in that space anyway. But
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about your own experiences.
I think there's getting a mentor could be 2 things. It could be paying a mentor, and it could be actually finding mentorship through someone. Like you guys, in my opinion, have mentored me through various aspects of things. You've not charged me for them, so thanks. But I've also paid a significant
Invoice is
amount. I've also paid a significant amount of money, like in the past few years. And there's been value from both of those things. Different amounts of value, different types of value. It's getting a mentor is very underrated if you can find yourself a great mentor. It's very overrated if you don't find a great mentor. I've had both. I've had experience with people that I've worked with, paid a lot of money and had a lot of success with. And from the opposite end of that, some of the most valuable things that I've learned from people has been for free. And I've actually just met a guy quite recently.
Happy for you, David.
Thanks, my fiance.
Big announcement.
Who is like so far ahead of me in the business world. He's taught me so much. I've met the guy 3 times. He's taught me an insane amount. And I was like, can I train you for free? I just want to like learn from you, pick your brain. He's like, don't be daft. Like, I'll pay you for, training and coaching. I'm happy to help you. And he doesn't want to charge me. And the advice that he's given me in the last 3, maybe 4 hours time with him has been more valuable than I've spent on other mentors that I've spent, let's say 20 hours with. So I think it's, again, some of these are very hard to determine if it's underrated or overrated. It completely depends on circumstance.
A lot of people never look for a mentor though at all, do they? Or they look for one just online. And I think there's a lot of benefits to finding an online mentor. And we're speaking about relatable piece, but finding somebody who's relatable but a little further ahead of you, that's great from a mentorship perspective. But you guys have gone out and paid thousands of pounds for mentors. So I'm very interested in what that experience has been like. And David, you've shared there about how that's worked for you. Chris?
Yeah, well, so I did have a mentor, and I'll get to that experience in a second, but I had the wrong, I used to have the attitude where, like, when I was trying to kind of get my business off the ground, I would see people investing in, like, say, courses or mentorships, and I would think that's what I need, that's the silver bullet that I need to get my things going. So that was a complete wrong attitude to have. So if you're thinking that, then you need to dismiss that attitude right away, because it's only going to lead to you signing up to these things and realising, I actually need to do some work, to get this thing going. But the one common thing that I always noticed in people that I used to look up to was having mentors. Like, you always see that, like, people post about, like, this mentorship done this for me, this mastermind done this for me. So I always used to think, like, well, when I'm at the level where I can afford these things, I'm going to invest in it and it's going to take off. And I got to that level in, like, 2020, I think it was, just about maybe like 6 months after I went full time into the business I'm running now, and I seen this opportunity come up, and it was with somebody who, had a lot of success and invested in the mentorship, and it was a complete crock of shit from start to finish. It was a course that was dressed up as a mentorship, and it was a course that you had to go through, and then I had a call with the mentor. And he forgot my name and basically told me,
that's terrible,
all you need to do is find 12 people. Who knows why 12 must be a magic number. You find 12 people who want to do what you do and teach them how to do what you do. So it was basically like a bait and switch, because I was talking about building a copywriting business and scaling it and bringing on more clients and doing this and doing that, and he just basically tried to put a square peg in a round hole.
He was like, I can teach you to be a mentor in copywriting, and you're like, I want to build a copywriting business.
I was like, mate, I'm 6 months into this, who am I going to mentor? And it was a complete, and also very quickly, I was putting a Slack group with all these hippie dippy dweebs, right? They were all from, like, the West Coast in America, and it was all like, right guys, meditation is live tonight, and like, who else is doing the 5-day gut microbiome reset this week? And I was like, get me out of here, man. I went on one call, nobody understood me. I asked one question, he was like, sorry, can you repeat that? I'm having some trouble with your accent. And I was like, I'm out of here, man. See you later.
What you mentioned there, I found it to be quite common with mentors, because I've had, I think, 3. They don't seem to want a lot. Well, some of the people I've worked with haven't seemed to want you to scale your own business. They want you to become a mentor, or they want you to teach other people what you're doing. And for me, and I actually started to go down that route, it led me down that route. For me, someone I work with said to me, they were like, you should just teach other coaches and personal trainers how to replicate what you've done. I wasn't really interested in doing that, and I tried it and I didn't love it to the extent of I love building my actual coaching business. So for me, I think if I was to find another mentor, it would be someone that was, like, interested in helping me scale my actual coaching business, not to become a mentor. Because, like you mentioned there, a lot of them just want you to then mentor what you already know, which is fine. It's a great way to make money. I know plenty of people killing it in that game, but it's not necessarily what I want.
But it's a whole separate economy, like the repackaged expertise economy is what I call it, because that's what like, people seem to think that they get to a certain level and then they've either got to create a course or launch a mastermind or become a mentor. Now, there's nothing wrong with any of those things, but I think, again, it depends on how you're arriving at that conclusion. Because if you notice everything you've done in your business, David, or everything you've done in your career that's benefited you, it's been from a good place and the right decision. It's never been from a place of like, I have to do this, or like this, a place of kind of like, I'm at a crossroads, I should just do this because this is the kind of easy route. It's always positioned as that's always something that I look out for. Like, if a piece of advice comes like, it's an easy play, you'll make loads of money, it's like, that automatically it doesn't quite sit right straight away, and that's why most of these things are cobbled together and basically it's the same repackaged stuff you find over and over again. And if it's a mentorship, I don't think people really realise what that really means.
A mentorship should be very hands-on.
Getting to know somebody, really kind of challenging them, holding them accountable, coming to the table with ideas and testing. It should actually be, in my opinion, because there's a book, Robert Greene's book Mastery talks about this, talks about the apprenticeship phase, and like it should be a really like intense experience. Because speaking of Robert Greene, if you know, like Ryan Holiday's somebody we all know, and we've all read his work. He was Robert Greene's apprentice. He was his research assistant, and he talks about how intense that period was. Now, he didn't pay for it, obviously, but it's a similar, same concept. That mentorship should be intense. It should challenge you. You should really be pushed out your comfort zone. And I would actually go as far as to say maybe sometimes you shouldn't really like your mentor if he's actually pushing the right buttons for you to grow. Yeah. So yeah, let's just went off there.
No, I think they're really, really good examples. And I think if I was to talk about the mentorship in the corporate space, like a lot of the time it can be your line manager, or it needs to be somebody who's a little bit further up, either in the same space as you or in a separate division, but does a similar role at a better level than you. And not a lot of organizations get it quite right. But when I was in my first role, and this is probably the only time I've probably had 2 or 3 different mentors, I had an official buddy, and it was a lady who was 35 years old doing my job, but just at a higher level. Yeah. And she just taught me all the tricks of the trade, basically how she operated, what she said to people on the phone, what she did on her emails, how she held difficult conversations, some of the key objections that she'd had over the years. And it wasn't some fancy meditation mentorship. It was just, how does somebody who's 4 or 5 steps further down the road than me, how do they operate and what do they do? And it was just an arm around the shoulder to say, this is what I do. Or like if I had a disastrous meeting, I'd be like, oh, Lindsay, can you talk to me about meetings that you've had like that and maybe what you would have done in my position? Yeah. Or she would come to meetings with me and I'd do the opener, and then she would do the agenda. Yeah. She would show me what our meeting notes might look like once I get up to speed. So it was almost like although it was called a buddy, she was very much my mentor to bring me up to speed to an acceptable level. And then equally, she wasn't fussed about going to the places that I maybe want to go to within my career, because she had a family, she was very settled, and she was very happy earning what she earned in that job and doing very, very well for it. But she was kind of like, right, I've taught you quite a lot now, Cole. Like, you crack on with whatever you want to get involved in. So I then needed to look for another mentor, another space. So I found somebody who was like 4 or 5 years older than me, but doing much, much better than me. And I was like, right, okay, so what does he do in meetings? Like, what do his cold calls sound like? What do his proposals look like? How do his emails sound? And it was just a case of like finding different, like almost role models and getting some sort of practical mentorship from them, not them telling me that like how to become a line manager would be the example, wouldn't it? They were just telling me how to be really good as a business development professional. And I think so many industries get it so wrong, and they just assign you somebody who's you're directly online to, but it was more me finding somebody who's doing kind of my role, but a bit further on.
Yeah.
Would you say though, in your line of work, if you're trying to find a mentor, there might be some resistance because whoever's ahead of you might think he's coming for my job? There's a little bit of that creep in?
I experienced that with someone I worked with though, when I launched a program and it done better than his program, and I experienced some like, I could tell there was a bit of resentment there. Like,
peanut butter and jealous.
I told him the numbers that I done for a certain launch, and he was like, "What? Really?" And he was like, "Can I get me to clarify?" I think you know.
Like, oh my god, who done your copy?
I think you know what I'm talking about.
I know, I do know.
And after that, the relationship certainly did go a little bit more sour to an extent.
Interesting.
And I actually think is that purely because, well, I actually know for a fact that I got better numbers on a program than he did, which was one of the reasons I actually stopped working with him as well. Because like I said earlier, for me, finding a mentor, finding someone relatable, I want to find someone that's that good bit further ahead than me.
Evolutionary, you're right, Chris. We would probably not want to bring on somebody that's a threat to us, because that threatens our status in the animal kingdom, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It might knock you off King of the Jungle perch. Yeah. But for me, I guess you're right. Within the corporate ladder, you need to find somebody who's maybe willing to help. So, like, I'll mention her by name. Lindsay was fantastic for me because she wasn't threatened by me in the slightest. I was a 21-year-old graduate. She would wanted me to go to the top, but she knew it wouldn't knock her out of place because she had no interest in getting a job in a different space. Yeah. So I do think that can be a challenge. A lot of the time, you need to find somebody who's like maybe settled with a family, and they've kind of changed their mindset around their career, and they kind of see you, they can maybe live vicariously through you if you are on a faster track than them at a younger age. So I think that's a really, really good point. Like, they're maybe less threatened by you, but I suppose if you looked at somebody who was like if I'm talking about graduate scheme stuff, if somebody was like at the end of the graduate scheme and they were mentoring you, they're probably like, Christ, that he could be competing with me in 3 years' time for the head of sales job or the head of whatever job.
Yeah.
If I bring him on too much, I'm maybe cutting my own grass here.
Yeah, I tell you the wrong things, like, you know, get your knob out in meetings.
I'd round that
Talk
one
about
up.
dolphins.
I'd round that one up by, I'd say it's overrated feeling the need to pay a mentor, and I think it's underrated finding someone to mentor you in a local space.
Well done, D Hatt. That was nailed it.
Yeah, beautiful.
Nailed it.
Thanks.
Well done.
Number 7 is Starbucks, but that's not the coffee at Starbucks. It's going to Starbucks, isn't it, David?
The experience.
The experience.
Underrated.
The Starbucks.
Best place ever. I love it.
I would say it's, I mean, as somebody that doesn't drink coffee, I would also say it's underrated. I worked from Starbucks for a long time before I got an office and stuff like that. Even back when I was coaching, I would go to Starbucks to do my copy work on the side. So yeah.
Free Wi-Fi,
Yep.
free parking, always good service. The tables don't rattle like they do in Costco, Costa.
They don't care when you smuggle in cans of White Monster.
Yeah.
They just don't care. They just
I
let
would
you
like.
crack on.
They
taken
don't
in-
mind when I don't wear a mask in there. That's probably my favourite
I've
thing.
taken in a tub of oats before and asked them for hot water as well.
So they don't do that anymore.
Solid.
They don't fill up your water anymore because of COVID, but they'll be back doing that soon. So yeah, I think the actual overall and you know their tagline, what is it? A place between work and home. Is that right? Is that what
Think
that-
so,
That's
yeah.
exactly what you
that is
achieve with it.
literally what I
That's
do.
it,
I
yeah.
go from there before I go to the office. My first kind of 2-3 hours of like deep work in the morning is almost always in there because I find it easy to concentrate. And like you said, the coffee's not that great. Like I like good coffee and I like going for like a nice Italian coffee somewhere, like a proper coffee. But I mean, I know what I spend in Starbucks. Actually, I just closed it on my Instagram recently. I spend an insane amount on Starbucks in a yearly basis. But for me, it actually brings me more, I suppose, income.
Yeah.
But like productivity, I get a lot more done in there than I do my house. Too many distractions. My office, far too many distractions because the people I work with are absolute animals.
It's also a good. Do you know what? It's always a good vibe in Starbucks as well because I'm just gonna say it right. See, like Costa, not a fan, and then Tim Hortons. well,
mate.
the place. So Tim Hortons and Cumbernauld is like the Star Wars bar. When you walk
it?
in there, right, it's full of
so bad.
absolute moon units, right? And you're just trying to get some work done, and you've just got all of these absolute
They can't
space
take an
cadets.
order, can they?
Can't take an order.
Every time I've been there.
Always get your order wrong. And by the way, my order is a Diet Coke and occasionally like a bagel. And then they'll bring God.
Apologise
They'll
if
bring
anyone's
God.
watching this that
They'll
works
bring
in Tim
God
Hortons.
knows what. Yeah. So the vibe's essential because like you can't really get into.
It's not as clean either. Starbucks
Aye.
is always clean.
Aye, yeah, and also the drive through at Tim Hortons and Cumbernauld goes like round the side, so like it's right up against the window, so people just sit and stare at you when you're doing your work, and it's
Yeah.
always somebody you end up knowing, and then you're having this weird conversation through 3 panes of glass with somebody that you kind of went to high school. And,
Not
Go
good.
away.
But
Overrated.
Not good.
But I'm not fussed because I work from home. I could go and work in a Starbucks though because now my role is entirely home based and out of clients, so I could go work in a Starbucks because I don't have an office in Glasgow where they expect me to go there. Because if I went and worked in a Starbucks and we had an office in Glasgow, they'd be like,
Yeah.
"Colin, what are you doing?"
Get yourself. Aye, yeah, that's fair.
So I can definitely see the benefits, particularly for business owners or remote workers, because as long as you create a good environment. Would you ever have like a Zoom call in there with a client or somebody like that?
have
Are you
had-
comfortable with that?
I have.
I wouldn't do it, mostly because of the noise from the music, to be honest. I have done it though. And if I was to have an in-person meeting, I'd typically go to Starbucks.
Yeah, I just connect my earpods to my laptop and it kind of filters out the noise. I just always make sure like I'm sitting like in the corner, like against the wall, so it's not really.
Confidentiality wise, you're normally okay. as well.
Yeah. I've done a couple of them, but it's still it's not ideal. I'd much prefer to be in my office or.
I mean, I suppose it depends what the call's on. If it's a client and it's a setup of a new client, probably wouldn't want to do it in a public space as much as it wouldn't really matter. They're not going to know who it is, but it depends if you're talking
But
about
for your
finances,
deep,
things
but
like
for
that.
your deep written work, your deep creation work,
Starbucks.
Starbucks ticks the box really well.
For me, yeah, perfect.
No,
Yeah, it does. I actually kind of, for me personally, I find if I've got distractions, it kind of focuses me like a lot more. Like the things I used to focus, which is like the same song on repeat over and over again, they go to another level, and I just like really get locked in. So even though there's all this stuff going on around me, people clearing tables, just general hustle and bustle, I just get absolutely locked in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, like I think for me, I suppose is a weird one. It's almost a sense of accountability because if I'm in the house, I'm quite happily sitting and put Netflix on. Watch YouTube videos.
yeah.
I'm not going to sit in Starbucks with my feet up watching like a Netflix video. So for me, it's almost like public accountability to an
Is it?
extent.
Yeah,
people,
you're right.
people know that I'm in
Interesting.
there working.
Yeah,
So there's a
yeah.
little bit of that as well for me.
so if you were just watching YouTube in there, you'd be like ashamed of yourself.
Yeah, I would be. I have done it, but yeah, I'd be ashamed.
Okay.
I'd go home and
Go on.
To my pillow.
Number 8, a financial one. Credit cards, are they overrated or underrated?
Underrated. Massively. People don't use them properly.
Yeah,
Myself included, but by the way, I'm not like, that's not a superiority thing. Like, I used them terribly before I read, I think I sent both of you the book, didn't I? I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. And when I read that book and I realised like the power of credit cards and how you can use them to your advantage and leverage them to get so much kind of benefits basically.
Yeah.
Like for example, I got the Amex, the British Airways Amex card.
Yeah.
And we used it for all our household things. Generally nothing huge, like because we couldn't go anywhere at the time. So like a couple of weekends away would be the bigger purchases, like say a hotel or something or flights. But generally just the weekly shop and then within a year we've now got 3 flights to New York.
Yeah.
And that's money, by the way, that's money that we were already spending. It's not as if we went out our way to spend extravagantly.
It was previously going to be spent on a debit card.
Exactly.
You just
Yeah.
You put it on a credit card, pay it off at the end of every month. You do that, you accumulate points. I mean, we were in Dubai going out for dinner and I got an email saying, "Congratulations, Mr. Burns, you have 3 flights." And that's like no effort.
To magnify that point, this guy I was talking about that I've started to get mentorship off of literally uses credit cards to run his business to an extent. He does a lot. He puts all his paid advertisement on credit cards. He has 800 free flights to New York. 800. He literally cannot use them. His business is worth a like substantial sum, but he puts all his marketing spend on credit cards and then just pays it off and benefits from the points from that. And when he told me that, he's literally like, "Do you want a flight? Like anytime you're going to New York," not as if I go to New York a lot. I have flights. You know, you can use them. You can use my points. Blah blah blah. And I was just like, wow. And he really like, Chris, that book actually like hit home the points of like why you should be using them or how to use them properly. And then the other day when I was speaking to him and he said that, I was like, this is a guy making, crazy money that uses credit cards for everything in life to actually, reap the rewards from them.
Now, a lot of the things that people think about credit cards are that they're high risk, that they're potential way to get into debt. And that's actually true.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But the way that we're speaking about them is for making purchases that you can afford within your limits already, but you're just either, you can buy yourself a little bit of time because obviously it pays off at the end of the month, but you were going to be able to have the capital to make that payment for the weekly shop, for the things that you were buying on your marketing spend for your business. All these things were going to be spent anyway. You're just using the credit cards and the different benefits that are part of that to do so, because otherwise you are just paying interest on, it's the worst kind of debt you can get, isn't it?
100%.
And so many people are like, they have such a bad relationship with credit, and like we have this kind of like credit generation where people are like, "Oh well, I put that on Klarna." Like, I'm absolutely horrified that Klarna's a thing, but I guess maybe I'm coming from a privileged position where I've not had to spread payments out. But I'm worried that sometimes people think credit cards are like
Free money.
the devil, and it's free. But because it's free money, David, because they treat it like free money, and they're like, "Oh, I bought these shoes on credit," and you're like, "Don't. Why did you do that?" Whereas if you had the Amex card with the British Express, British Airways, or a number, so many other benefits and options, aren't there? You can benefit massively, and especially if it's money you're going to spend anyway.
Yeah, well, I think that's the point. I'll be honest, I've seen both sides of this, because when my business was not doing well, I had to rely on credit cards, so I was carrying a balance. So I've seen both sides of this, having a poor kind of psychology towards that. Even though I wasn't getting out and living it up and buying fucking £600 Balenciaga trainers, but like I was still relying on
Overrated,
very much. So you look ridiculous. But so I've seen both sides, but generally reading that book totally transformed how I viewed using credit to your advantage. So I do understand, like, if you're in that position where perhaps you do have to rely on it, or perhaps you're relying on it too much, like you get your credit card through and you see that you've got like $5,000 limit. And you think, I've got $5,000 to spend. Like, no, you do not. You've got whatever money you have coming in on a monthly basis to spend. And even if it is like a small amount, you can still leverage credit cards to get huge benefits and improve your credit rating,
I have this on here because David actually sent me a voice note before he had this conversation with his kind of new mentor. And he was super excited. He was like, what credit card to use? What benefits you get? I've spoken to, and I was like, you need to speak to Chris as well, because we've all read the same book.
Yeah.
And David was like, when I read that section of the book, I did it passively.
Yeah.
But now I'm rereading it and I'm like, right, I need to take advantage of this, because David spends money on Starbucks, for example. If you were using an Amex in there, you would have got quite a lot of benefits.
1,000%. And I think, again, that guy actually recommended a different credit card, so it's good getting people's opinions on things. But I'm similar to you in the sense of, I've never had to use credit card out of necessity. So I've thought, I don't need a credit card. I can afford to buy these things that I want, which is great, obviously. But now that I'm actually seeing the benefits of using them when you don't necessarily need to use them, but you're using them for the benefits, rather than out of necessity, which I think is what most people should look to use them for. Look to use them as, you know, a way to get these benefits, rather than, I suppose some people generally do need them as well, which is a little bit of a different stance.
I think it's just like the general kind of view or like narrative around credit card is you automatically associate it, like you say, with debt. Like that's what we're kind of taught, like growing up, and like a lot of like our parents and grandparents came from that generation of like debt is a terrible thing. Like the only debt you should have is a mortgage. Like that's, they don't even view that as debt. They view that as an investment to pass down to the younger generation of the family. So like if you get a credit card, people automatically assume you must be struggling because you've not got enough money to pay for your life, so you need to do this.
Which isn't the case.
So it's like kind of flipping the script on that a little bit. And again, I think that book, How Will Teach You to Be Rich.
Great book.
Ramit Sethi, and follow him on Instagram and check out his blog and his mailing list, everything basically, because he talks a lot.
He's a real deal.
He talks a lot about the psychology of money, which I think is the main point here, isn't it? Like how you view the credit cards, either to your advantage or are they just going to be like a vice for a lot of people?
Yeah, I think we've summarised credit cards nicely there. And one of my recent guests, Laura, the thrifty Londoner, spoke about credit cards, and again, it came from that mindset switch where her parents were like, credit cards are risky. What are you doing? And she was like, well, actually, I've found ones that've got benefits. So lots of things for people to go away and research there. Number 9 is another food stuff. It's avocado.
I think it's overrated, but I really do like it.
It's overrated and it's revolting.
It's overrated and I'm just not fussed for it. It's just too expensive as well.
They are expensive.
You need your credit card for that, because I can't pay for that.
Get free flights to New York, buying yourself avocados.
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely like the taste of it, and there's a lot of health benefits from, you know, the fact that it has got really good healthy fats in it. But I also think there's a misconception around the fact that it's healthy, meaning the fact that it's going to be good for people dieting, which isn't the case, because it's the easiest way to add a boatload of calories for something that doesn't fill you up at all, which is the same for a lot of very high fat foods, olive oil, nuts, seeds, high fat meats. Avocados falls into that category. Yes, it's a health food, but it's not necessarily. In fact, I think it's a terrible dieting food for most people.
It's great marketing though, doesn't it?
It looks great. Yeah. Instagram's great, doesn't it? Like also
that's pretty much
on toast,
smashed avocado with eggs.
Yeah.
Like Jill loves it. Like she's mad for it, but like I don't know. I've tried.
No one loves it that much because it doesn't taste it that much.
I've tried
I do like
so many different ways because it annoys me when I don't like a food.
Yeah.
Like it winds me up. So like I try it so many, like same with mushrooms. Like I've tried them every way. I quite like olives.
I'm not a fan.
But like it really annoys me when I don't like a food because it means I can't order something in the menu. And that gets to me. So like I've tried it with like bacon also. I'm just not into it at all, man.
That was an easy one.
Yeah, easy enough.
Yep.
Number 10, fitness trackers. So that would be like your Apple Watches. I'm going to include things like the Oura rings and stuff like that within this as well. But most specifically like the kind of watches that track like calories burnt, step count, all that kind of stuff, heart rate.
I'm going to say underrated from a step perspective, but overrated from a calorie spend perspective. Like they don't accurately track how many calories you are burning, and also they confuse people if they're linked to things like MyFitnessPal. If your MyFitnessPal or any of your food tracking apps are linked to your fitness apps, just unconnect it right now. So yeah, I think that steps is great. It's a great measure to have as a general rule of thumb, looking at your overall expenditure. I think monitoring your daily steps / general movement is a great thing to do. I think more people should do it and should use it for that. But I would say stay clear of looking at the calories you burn because they're not accurate.
Yeah,
I would like that. I totally agree with David, and I would also like if you extend it to things like Oura Ring, Whoop, all these technologies. In my opinion, they are massively overrated. I think you can outsource certain things about your health and fitness to technology, but I think we're just not at the place where we can measure recovery actively through a ring or a strap. You know, it's just not there yet. And like looking into the kind of people that are kind of at the top of the kind of performance coaching game, the general consensus of these things is they're useless. You don't see widespread application of them in like top sports teams and things like that. You'll see the occasional athlete do it, probably because they're sponsored by them. But in my opinion, I just don't think like when it comes to like recovery, you know, if you're looking at a screen saying like, oh, my Whoop app says that I'm recovered, so this means I can go and do another hard workout, but you feel like absolute
You've got a torn
arse.
hamstring.
You know, it's like,
or the opposite as well, where it's telling you, oh, you're so fatigued, and you're like,
I feel good to go.
From a sleep standpoint, that one's so important. Like people have come into me, clients, and said, my Fitbit said I had 3 hours sleep last night. I'm like, how do you feel? I did feel all right before I looked at that. And it's like, that's
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. I just think, like, you know, if you're reliant, and again, you become reliant on that, don't you? Then that dictates. And then so rather than going and getting a workout and you're letting an app tell you that you shouldn't do it, and then you'd be much better off going and doing that workout if you feel okay. But by the same token, if you're absolutely burst and you're dragging your ass to the gym because your whip tells you like, oh, good to go, you're green, or you've got a score of whatever, not for me.
I think they're overrated, definitely. For steps, I use my phone still.
Yeah.
Do you?
I use my phone. I use my phone.
Yeah, and they're all imperfectly inaccurate. David's just been this fitness watch. Apple, you can sponsor them if you want them to try it again.
Yes, please.
So the thing for me is I think they're all inaccurate because I've walked with somebody before and we walked the same amount and my steps have shown different from my phone to
You've
Dave's
got little legs
showed.
though.
I was taller than them actually, so thank you very much.
You're taller than. Was it Dale?
He's gonna be so angry if he hears that. I'm 5'10" by the way, so it's fine. He's 5'6". We only had to edit one bit out of the last podcast, but I'm leaving that in.
I'll leave that in. Sorry, Dale.
So I think they're overrated because I think you can get the data from a lot of other places, and equally some data is really important, like how many calories am I eating today, but how many calories am I burning based on this watch is it's just nonsense. You see people post like 600 calorie leg sessions and I'm like, you have no idea what you'd have to do to burn 600 calories training. Like a really high volume workout is like 200-300 calories for like a decent sized individual moving decent sized weight.
Is it?
I think so.
I don't know on that one.
Do you think it's higher?
I'd like
Like
my
a weight
watch
session?
I suppose I'm thinking of like, my watches have recorded 1,000 calorie. You're saying that's over?
I think that's
Right, okay.
overrated. I believe that to be highly overestimated.
I agree. I think so. I think if you were to like accurately measure that, like say like a lab setting or something like that, I think you'd find it was really kind of 100, 200 calories for like a weight session, and people would be like, but then again, like the problem is people then go eat that back, don't they? People are like, I've got 600
I think
calories
that's
to
the
play
big
with.
fear, and David addressed it straight away. He was like, just do not link it at all with your MyFitnessPal because it will tell you to eat back that. So after a workout, you're like an extra 300 calories because you had a really hard leg session and you're still in a deficit. You're probably not. It's starting to endanger that. Okay.